everybody! I think I'm finally recording on a semi-sunny day. As a future mental health professional, I see, I hear, and I even read about what people think therapy is like. And this also happens when I tell people what I'm going to school for. And what I've gathered is that there are a lot of misconceptions about the therapy process, which is bad because we're over here trying to break the stigma around therapy and encourage people to work on their mental health. So if you're someone that doesn't work in the mental health field, I'm curious to see how many of these misconceptions you've thought of or you've heard of. And if you're interested, you can stick around because I'm trying to improve people's mental health literacy one video at a time. So let's get into the misconceptions. 1. My problems aren't serious enough for therapy. This is wild to me. We have this unspoken belief that our problems aren't serious because there will always be other people with more serious problems than us. And okay, that might be true, but that doesn't mean you have to suffer. That doesn't mean that you're not important and less deserving of help. Every person in the world can benefit from therapy. We're all going through it in life. No matter how great you think everything is, life can throw you a curveball. And regardless of how serious or non-serious you think your situation is, therapy can benefit you. No one has to meet this certain threshold of trauma to qualify for therapy. 2. I have friends and family, so I don't need a therapist. Okay, but how many of those ride or die friends of yours actually challenge you? Or do you have friends that just tell you what you want to hear so you can feel better? How does that help long term? Conversations with friends can be very, very therapeutic, don't get me wrong, but it's also a little selfish to assume that your friends can handle that all the time. And I know, your friends and family, they know you so well, so they just get it. But what happens when they don't have the capacity to handle your complex situations on top of their own? And then in the case that you're not doing any better, they start to feel bad. They almost feel the sense of responsibility and guilt for not helping you better. So it can take a toll on a relationship both indirectly and directly. And we don't want to do that to our friends and family. Also, therapists have the education, the experience, and the mental capacity for those kinds of conversations every single day. So much so that we can even take it a step further beyond the superficial challenges. Your friends may talk to you about your current situation, but a therapist will make connections from your past choices and your present choices so you can better your future choices. 3. Therapists will tell you what to do. No, we won't. You'll actually typically see a therapist refraining from overt instruction. We're trained to ask guided questions so you can answer your own questions. We're trained to guide you in determining what you want without any other influence from anyone else. We're also here to broaden options. That way you can think through different paths that you may not have already considered. We won't be there when you make your daily choices, so we won't be living out any of the consequences that come from them. And on top of that, if we just told you what to do, you're never going to be held accountable or responsible for your actions. You will always have someone to blame. Well, my therapist said that I was supposed to do this. My therapist said this, blah, blah, blah. Tell me how you learn from that. 4. People who go to therapy are weak, crazy, or seriously ill. Well, this one is annoying. And it's funny because the average client actually goes to therapy for things like self-confidence, self-esteem, stress, or relationships. And don't you sit there and tell me that you haven't experienced any of those yourself. So would you call yourself weak or crazy? Also, defining things as serious is subjective, and oftentimes it comes from the client. All that matters to us is if you want to improve aspects of your life and just better yourself overall. Come to think of it, we aren't really taught to define how serious a person's situation is unless it involves their safety or if they're in danger or putting other people in danger. You also don't need to have a certain problem or trauma in order to go to therapy. Honestly, some people just want to vent, and through that they get a lot of clarity about things, even themselves. Yeah, a therapist can help you work through a lot of your trauma, but a therapist can also help you maintain the level of happiness or content that you already have. Going to therapy does not mean that you're damaged. 5. I don't want to sit around and just talk for an hour. I don't actually blame people for thinking that what therapy is either sitting in a chair or laying down on a couch and just talking while your therapist is across from you, just nodding their head and writing on their notepads. We see it all the time in movies. There are so many different interventions and modalities that could be used, but it really comes down to the individual, what they want and what their situation is. If you prefer to have more therapid If you prefer to have more therapist-led activities or active engagement, let your therapist know that. Problem solving doesn't always have to be with really long and drawn-out conversations. Now, for those of you that prefer that, all the more power to you. Do whatever works best for you. So along with misconceptions, there are things that people are afraid of when it comes to therapy. So let's talk about what not to expect from therapy. Don't expect a quick fix. If you are looking for a quick fix, I promise you, you will be disappointed. And that doesn't help the situation because then you're gonna end up hating therapy, and then through word of mouth, everyone's gonna start thinking the bad things about it. If it were that easy, we wouldn't have a job. Oh, and in my opinion, quick fixes are like band-aids. You get quick fixes from friends and family, they make you feel better in that moment, but a therapist will help you grow. A therapist will give you that long-term healing that you need. Also, how do you expect to get better with just one session? There are so many problems that we go through in just a day. So it's unrealistic to assume that those problems can be fixed in such a short period, especially in an hour. And an exception to this might be something like exposure therapy for adults who are dealing with different phobias, but that's a whole different situation. But I'm serious, like think about it. Well, on average, we don't tell someone on a first date or when you meet a new friend your entire life story in one day. So why would you expect the same thing from a therapist? Don't expect the process to be easy. Yeah, this depends entirely on your coping skills, your self-awareness, and so many other things. But going to therapy means that you are going to take a hard look at yourself. It's not gonna be easy. And you're probably not gonna like a lot of the things that are brought up. Those things that you avoid every day. Those things that your friends tell you otherwise to make you feel better. But it's really necessary to talk about it and be real when you talk about it. They say that you typically leave feeling worse than when you came in, and that makes total sense. You're talking and sitting there about the traumas and the negative experiences that you have that you've probably suppressed and how to overcome them. You're going to be confronting yourself in situations that challenge you, which honestly can be really emotionally draining. So again, it's not easy. Don't expect your therapist to treat you how your friends treat you. You've got a therapeutic relationship, not a friendship. You're going to share a lot of really intimate details about yourself, but it's not a two-way street. The sessions are about you, not your therapist. Your therapist is going to act as your guide, not your friend. And also, it's the duty of the therapist to establish very clear boundaries from the start. But we're trained to keep the focus of the session on the client and the client's goals. And if you're experiencing this and you're like worried about it, don't take it in a negative way. It doesn't mean that we don't like you or that you shouldn't trust us. It's setting limits for that therapeutic relationship for your benefit. Don't expect to connect with the first therapist that you work with. All therapists have their therapeutic style, and it's perfectly fine if you don't mesh with it. There are a lot of theories and types of therapy that's practiced. Like for myself, I would want to go to someone who is going to keep me in check, keep me grounded, and challenge me. I don't really need to be nurtured in the way that other people need it. But that works for me, and I wouldn't expect that from my therapist, and I actually wouldn't appreciate that from my therapist. So this is just proof that you need to be aware of the kind of therapy that your therapist practices prior to going in. And that being said, don't judge it based on the first session. It may take 2 or 3 sessions for you two to really connect. To be fair, we're human. I have close friends that I didn't connect well with from the start. And finally, don't expect your therapist to tell you what to do. And I talked about this earlier. We are not going to tell you what to do in situations. We are not the ones that are living out the consequences of your choices. So please don't expect that, and don't just ask your therapist, well, what would you do in my situation? Or what do you think I should do? So that brings us to, why are there misconceptions about therapy? The media does not always portray therapy in the best way. We see a lot of patterns in movies and TV shows that completely misinform the audience about what therapy is like. But on the other hand, the media can't control how people take information, how they process it, and what they do with that information after. I say this because what we see in movies and TV shows highly influences how we form our conceptualizations and expectations for therapy. And unfortunately for some people, they can't differentiate between fiction and reality, which makes it even more difficult to break that stigma around therapy and how therapists should act. So yeah, that's today's video. I hope that this gave you a little bit more insight on therapy. I tried to make it short and sweet. I also hope that this gave you a more realistic illustration of the process. If you were considering going to therapy and were on the fence, take this as your sign to just do it. And remember, it takes time to find the right therapist. So if you don't connect with the one that you're working with, simply leave or just ask to be referred to somebody else. But best of luck to you in finding someone and for your whole therapy process. Feel free to subscribe. If not, feel free to follow me on Instagram. My handle is Intricate. Otherwise, I'll see you at the next one. Thank you. Bye.